The All Progressives Congress APC says not involved in Akwa Ibom assembly crisis. The federal government runs up a 1 trillion naira deficit in first 8 months of 2019 budget. In international news, some migrants at the U.S. border have begun a hunger strike. And in sport, Cameroon stripped of AFCON hosting rights.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. The news agency of Nigeria is reporting that the All Progressives Congress APC has denied any involvement in the alleged attempt to impeach Governor Ibom Emmanuel of Akwa Ibom State. The Speaker of the State House of Assembly, Onofiok, had earlier declared vacant seats of 5 APC lawmakers who showed up at the Assembly earlier this week and reconvened with a new maze. They immediately initiated impeachment proceedings against Governor Ibom Emmanuel. The ruling People's Democratic Party in the state cried foul and accused former Governor Godswill Akpabio of sponsoring the move. Akpabio is an APC leader in the state. Now, the state's APC chairman, Ime Okwodibo, said in New York on Thursday that his party was not involved in the crisis. He characterized earlier statement by state PDP chairman pinning the crisis in the State House of Assembly and alleging that APC sponsored the move to impeach the governor as faulty and misleading. Abiola Oshodi-Glover, Deputy Inspector General of Police, who takes charge of information communication technology, says the police will stay neutral in political matters. In a move to guarantee peace and concord in next year's election, all registered political parties have agreed to meet in Abuja in mid-December to sign a formal peace accord. The National Peace Committee announced this on Thursday after a long meeting with the parties and stakeholders. Catholic Bishop of Sokoto Diocese, Hazan Kuka, who is a member of the committee, said the parties have agreed to adopt the same principles that were in place during the successful 2015 elections to ensure that 2019 will be peaceful as well. The committee has asked political parties and politicians to refrain from making or sponsoring public statements, pronouncements, declarations or speeches that have the capacity to incite any form of violence before, during and after the elections.
After the meeting today, tomorrow we are going to meet all the chairmen and secretaries of the registered political parties. The aim of the meeting with the political parties is to try to reach an understanding where we will get them at a later date to sign the memorandum of understanding.
The federal government is tasking the United States to remain neutral in the politics of the nation and not to give an impression it is supporting any candidate in next year's election. Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, was commenting on the statement that the U.S. Embassy has been offering a U.S. visa to presidential candidate Abubakar Atiku. The minister said although the U.S. Embassy reserves the right to issue visas to anyone it wants, granting one to Atiku at this time could be taken to mean a covert endorsement of one candidate over the other for the 2019 elections. The minister said President Muhammadu Buhari is not bothered and is not panicking about the issue. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation says the National Assembly has not been fair in its position that the corporation violated processes while subsidizing petrol. Group Managing Director Mekanti Baru made this charge while speaking at a bid opening for NNPC insurance contractors in Abuja. Baru said more than 600 brokers have submitted bids for the corporation's insurance contract. He said NNPC was transparent in its processes and does work with integrity and accountability, contrary to what the public believes. Barrow said NNPC did what was necessary to meet the requirements of the lawmakers to rid the pumps of queues during the fuel shortage. He said now that lawmakers are comfortable, they are finding fault. He said they should give NNPC benefit of doubt and ask questions the NNPC would explain. The Senate began an investigation of NNPC on allegations of diverting $1 billion from the Nigerian liquefied natural gas dividend account. An ad hoc committee has been set up to investigate an alleged $3.5 billion account kept by NNPC for petrol subsidy payment. This is separate from the $1 billion diversion investigation. Meanwhile, the Nigerian Port Authority is responding to allegations of non-remittance of its operating surplus of about 180 billion naira into the Consolidated Revenue Fund. NPA management says it has already remitted into the Consolidated Revenue Fund 30.5 billion naira, which is 80% of its operating surplus for last year. It appears Nigeria may benefit economically from the United Kingdom's exit from the European Union next year. The development finance arm of the UK CDC Group could invest more than $1 billion in the country over the next 4 years. The UK government wants to increase business ties with Africa after it leaves the European Union in March. Bloomberg Business Television is quoted as reporting the CDC wants to put as much as $4.5 billion into the continent in that time to almost double its existing African portfolio of $2.5 billion. It was also reported that CDC will open offices in Lagos and Nairobi in addition to its existing Johannesburg office. The Nigerian office is expected to open early next year with at least 10 persons. The Nigerian Budget Office says the government has incurred a huge 1 trillion naira fiscal deficit during the first 8 months of this year. The 9 trillion naira budget was to have been financed from about 3 trillion naira it expected from oil revenue. 31 billion naira from LNG dividend and 1 billion was to be realized through minerals and mining revenue. To fund the budget, the government has planned to generate close to 3.5 trillion naira from companies' income tax, value-added tax customs, federation account levies, independent revenue from agencies, tax amnesty in income signature bonus, and unspent balance from previous years. The government was only able to raise just about 2.5 trillion naira. The government says the shortfall was a result of underperformance of both oil and non-oil revenue sources. Those huge figures are making me dizzy. Coming up, African stories. China says it has no plans and has never thought of recolonizing Africa. And later, international stories. Some migrants at the U.S. border have begun a hunger strike. Stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
This used to be me. But that was before I got the perfect bag. It's handy and easy to use. All I need in one compact space, just like my MTN Extra Value plan. I used to get one plan for my calls and then try to remember which data plan worked for me. Roaming was a totally different ballgame. Not anymore. I've got the MTN Extra Value all-in-one plan. If you're a data buff like me, you get extra data with some talk time. And if you like to make calls, you get extra talk time with some data. And when I'm abroad, I automatically browse, chat, and call right on the same plan. MTN Extra Value was made just for me.
More of data or calls, whichever one you prefer. MTN Extra Value is made just for you.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to news across Africa. South Africans will have to put up with some light out as energy giant Eskom begins load shedding of at least 2,000 megawatts nationwide. The energy company faces some operational challenges, including the deterioration of its coal-fired power stations. It has not been smooth sailing for the energy company, which has faced corruption and mismanagement scandals for several years. It was accused of shading coal deals with the Gupta family, close friends of former President Jacob Zuma. The Guptas were named in the state of capture report by former Public Protector Tulumando Sela. This is the first nationwide load shedding exercise after many months. A load shedding schedule has been released to ensure customers know when their electricity would be off. A United Nations internal probe shows that its refugee agency in Uganda wasted tens of millions of dollars last year overpaying for goods and services, awarding major contracts improperly, and failing to avoid fraud, corruption, and waste. The audit by the U.S. Office of Internal Oversight Services found multiple areas of mismanagement that were the responsibility of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, such as an $8 million contract for road repairs awarded to a contractor with no experience in road construction, and questionable payments to trucking and bus companies worth another $8 million. Tens of millions of transport-related invoices are still being disputed with contractors. The audits also found stockpiled goods, more lying idle that had been distributed in the previous 12 months, including 298,000 blankets and 50,000 wheelbarrows. In addition, 50,000 solar lamps worth almost $300,000 were found to have gone missing, and no proper investigation was done. A top Chinese official says his country has no plans and has never thought of recolonizing Africa. Zhao Yuchao, China's ambassador for affairs of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in the Foreign Ministry, said contrary to such claims, China's aim is to pursue a mutual partnership with the continent. China has come under scrutiny lately by some African scholars and leaders in the political and civic space who fear the country was investing heavily on the African continent with an undeclared ulterior motive. Critics of China's deep pocket fear poor African countries' over-reliance and heavy indebtedness to China was unsustainable and would soon come back to haunt them. China has poured billions of dollars in funding into Africa for infrastructure projects and in grants, but signs of loan repayment stress are now showing in some of the poor countries. Analysts warned China was likely to hold the countries hostage to their own whims. At the conference on the Belt and Road Initiative and Industrialization Cooperation between China and Tanzania in Dar es Salaam, a Chinese judge said his country has no political agenda on the continent. Malawi police has confirmed heavy rainfall accompanied by heavy storm has damaged 74 houses and property, with at least 5 persons sustaining minor injuries in Makanjira, Mangoshi. The storm occurred Sunday afternoon at Makanula village in the area of traditional authority Makanjira. Sergeant Amina Daudi, Deputy Police Relations Office for Mangoshi Police, said the storm damaged a 2-classroom school block and teacher's office for Namikos Primary School in Makanjira, Mangoshi. She said the injured 5 were rushed to Makanjira Health Center where they were treated as outpatients. A preliminary result on the extent of damage is yet to be produced by the District Council. Zimbabwe's Finance and Economic Development Minister, Professor Thulu Nkube, has announced that all civil servants will receive their annual bonus by today, Friday. He said this is a huge improvement and departure from previous years where payments of bonuses were staggered, with some payments stretching to the middle of the following year. In another economic story from Zimbabwe, President Mnangagwa has officiated at the groundbreaking ceremony of the Acadia lithium mine that is expected to have an initial investment of $165 million. The project is expected to employ more than 1,000 persons and spur construction of other amenities like roads, schools, and houses. And more than 400 Ethiopian migrants stranded in Yemen are being airlifted home this week. This is the first time since 2015 the International Organization for Migration has been given the go-ahead for this operation to resume. The first group of Ethiopian migrants were flown home on Monday. By the time this voluntary humanitarian return operation, or VHR, ended on Thursday, the UN Migration Agency had airlifted 418 migrants from Yemen to Ethiopia. More than a quarter of these passengers are minors, and during the past few years, the IOM voluntary humanitarian return operation has assisted many migrants to go home by sea. But the agency notes returning the migrants by plane is a better, safer option. International Organization for Migration says at least 100,000 migrants reached Yemen last year. It says majority of them risking their lives in those dangerous trips are Ethiopians, but Somalis and Eritreans are also in the mix. When we return, international stories. Some migrants at U.S. border in Tijuana will now on hunger strike. Later in sport, Cameroon stripped of AFCON hosting rights. Stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Madam, go and bring us your husband. Okay, hello baby. We're in this together, okay? Can you hear me? Keep coming forward. Wait, stop. You okay, lean to your right. Keep walking down, keep walking to the left, yes. You're almost here. Keep going. You are here. Wow, you did it.
I'm just so glad I didn't have to use my cane to do this.
And I am so glad no other man got you before me. Let me be your eyes.
We will never stop working to give you a network you can rely on, so you can enjoy life's special moments. MTN, everywhere you go.
We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow this story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to events around the world. Some of the thousands of Central American migrants camped out at the U.S.-Mexican border waiting to plead their case for asylum in the United States began a hunger strike on Thursday to protest against the Mexican police blocking them. Members of the 6,000-strong caravan, mostly migrants from Honduras, had been sleeping outside on cold floors on Martin, an overcrowded shelter, since they arrived 3 weeks ago in Tijuana City across the border from San Diego, California. Mexican immigration authorities began transporting some of the migrants via buses to a new shelter on Thursday to help lessen the strain. Under the harsh immigration policies introduced by the Trump administration, U.S. border officials say the migrants may have to remain in Mexico for months before they can petition U.S. authorities. U.S. President Donald Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, has admitted he lied about a Trump property deal in Russia during the 2016 election. Cohen pleaded guilty to lying to Congress. He said he did so out of loyalty to Trump, who said his former right-hand man was lying to prosecutors in the hope of receiving a reduced sentence. A special counsel is investigating Russia's role in the 2016 election and whether there is any evidence of Trump collusion. Cohen pleaded guilty in August to violating finance laws during the 2016 election by handling hush money for Trump's alleged lovers. Appearing unexpectedly before a federal judge in Manhattan on Thursday morning, 52-year-old Cohen pleaded guilty to one count of making false statements to Congress. He said at the hearing that he had submitted a false written statement about a Trump organization plan to build a skyscraper in the Russian capital. Ukraine's president has asked NATO to deploy naval ships to the Sea of Azov amid a standoff with Russia. That plea has been sharply criticized by the Kremlin on Thursday as a provocation that could further inflame tensions between the two countries. In an interview in the German daily Bild on Thursday, President Petro Poroshenko laid out his hope that NATO would relocate naval ships to the Sea of Azov in order to assist Ukraine and provide security against what he called Russian President Vladimir Putin's ambition. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says Poroshenko's request is clearly aimed at provoking further tensions. He also said the move was driven by the Ukrainian leader's electoral and domestic policy motives. European politicians have called for new sanctions on Russia over its clash with Ukraine. China has suspended Jiang Kui, the scientist who claims to have produced the world's first gene-edited babies, and he now looks set to face punishment after publicly revealing research many in the scientific community condemned as irresponsible. Vice Minister of the Ministry of Science and Technology, Chao Nangping, told State News Jiang later on Thursday his work was extremely abominable in nature. Chao said genetically engineering the DNA of twin girls so they would not develop HIV-breached scientific ethics, adding that gene editing of human for reproduction purposes was explicitly in China. He admitted at a gene editing conference in Hong Kong on Wednesday that he had already initiated another pregnancy, although he was too soon to tell if it would go to full term. British Prime Minister Theresa May has said she plans to raise the killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi and the situation in Yemen with Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman at the G20 summit in Argentina. Earlier on Thursday, French President Emmanuel Macron also said he intended to meet with MBS in what would be bin Salman's first meetings with Western leaders since Khashoggi killing in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in October. The visit by the prince to the summit of industrialized nations has been fraught with controversy over the murder. Up next, sports. Cameroon stripped of AFCON hosting rights. Stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
If you know fit go internet or follow for Twitter, you know fit snap photo send or get it photo send. Now because you dey use Palasa, your phone no dey answer. See me see wahala. My brother, go get smartphone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no go for your hand, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no fit take selfie. Drop that Palasa phone. No be correct phone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone.
Upgrade to a smartphone today and get double data for 6 months on any MTN data bundle you buy. Simply purchase a smartphone from any store, anywhere in Nigeria, or bring your current smartphone from any network. Insert your MTN SIM card to start enjoying your double data bonus. Offer is open to all new and existing MTN subscribers. Join the largest smartphone movement today.
Make it not for your hand, that's phone.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News and Sport. Cameroon has been stripped of the rights to host the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations. This was decided today at the meeting of the Confederation of African Football (CAF) executive meeting in Accra. The decision was based on 2 reports that were tabled at the meeting on inspection visits by CAF's Security Committee in late October and middle of November. Cameroon had run the risk of losing the right to host the event for months, especially when the number of participating teams was increased from 16 to 24. A 1-month window is now open for interested countries to submit bids. This is the second time CAF has stripped a country of hosting rights for the continent's Showpiece Championships. Kenya was stripped of hosting the African Nations Cup in January. Morocco hosted that event. Nigeria remained 44th in the FIFA rankings released on Thursday, but dropped from 3rd to 4th in the African rankings. Nigeria moved up 4 places in October after defeating Libya over 2 legs in Uyo in their 2019 Africa Cup of Nations qualifying doubleheader in the middle of last month. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on this and other stories, visit our website, annafrica.net. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a great weekend.